Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for U Sports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics with what is clearly everyone's most anticipated exit meeting interview of the whole series. Because not only are we talking about my Guelph Gryphons, your Guelph Gryphons, everybody's Guelph Gryphons. It's truly an interview because of the special guest we have joining us. I will use no more time to get into it other than to say, Tom, how the heck are you doing, my friend?
Could not be doing any better, my man. A two-time Yates Cup, one-time Vanier Cup champion, a guy that I got to share a very small coach's booth in up top in 2019. He is the head coach for your Guelph Gryphons. Mark Surya joins the podcast. Coach, how are you doing this fine Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, doing well. What an intro, guys. What an intro. I mean, look at this, the excitement. I love it. Anytime you get to talk about football, it's a great day. So,
Well, Coach, at time of recording, I actually got to see you early in the day because I did a little bike ride from Alumni Stadium over to Ron Joyce. Because our boys didn't get it done last year in the At the 55 Bowl, and that's okay. It's even the greats falter here and there. But what I loved seeing, kind of stumbling into the building and needing to use the bathroom before I started on my ride, was how bustling that place was. All the meetings happening, everything kind of going on, the energy in the building. To whatever extent you want to talk about sort of here at the end of March, what's kind of happening in the building. Where sort of is the program at? What are the Guelph Gryphons doing here at this stage of off season, or as Coach Lang used to always say, there's no off season, it's all preseason or season.
yeah, it's. I'm sure we'll talk about this on the podcast today, but one of the amazing things, actually, in talking to Coach Lang about being a head coach and in general, is you can't lose the opportunity to learn the lesson of last year. So I think we're a very talented team. I thought last year was not our best year, especially during the regular season. I thought we underachieved in a few areas. And so in looking at it, we need to take a larger kind of step back and say, what are some things that we can do in the off season to help our players and put them in a better position to succeed? And so we completely overhauled what we did in the off season. And it's funny, as coaches, I've been in football since 2006 at the U Sports level. And so, unfortunately, that's 20 years now coming up. And you learn through experience that, like, it's very similar what teams have done in the past or what teams that I've been a part of, where they're all pretty close to even on what you do, right? So you have off-season practices at some places. There's workouts. There's all those different things. And because of the way that our structure is set up, we have the opportunity, and we're lucky enough to look at it and say, well, how do we overhaul the off-season to attack some of our weaknesses? And how do we look at it a different way than what maybe we've done in the past to think about football in a new way? And so there's, as you can see across the league, some of the legends that we've all played for or coached with or played against. Coach Marshall, shout out to him, amazing head coach. Coach Pat Shane, obviously my head coach. And you look at some legends of the game that have now retired and are ushering in the next generation. Well, the new coaches that are in town are looking at things differently. And what you saw today was kind of the tail end as we get into spring camp here of a long 11-week offseason where we completely flipped everything on its head.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement around the Griffin program right now. And obviously, when you look at Guelph, obviously you think of the facilities, you think of all of that, but it's the people that I think are really starting to raise eyebrows. For the folks that are seeing it on social media, some of the guys you have bringing back to teach the next generation, most that stick out in my head at the offensive and defensive line standpoint, you've got Eric Starsala, aka Ziggy, coming back and helping out with the offensive line, an outstanding player, obviously in the CFL right now. And then on the D-line, two guys you could not get better, and Grey Cup champion A.J. Allen and NFL star Tavius Robinson, both back in-house at Guelph, helping to teach your current guys. Talk to what that means, having those illustrious alumni back to help out.
Yeah, we're really lucky here. So what you start to realize is, now that I've been here since 2019, lucky enough to coach with or coach some of these players and coaches, you see the connection that's built from the Griffin program that happened long before I was here, right? And so credit to the previous staff. AJ was recruited previously when we arrived, Tavius as well. And you look at, Ziggy and all these different things. Well, it's our job as the current kind of the coaching staff to continue those traditions and continue what the program was built upon, which is, while it is really great, a great place to play and the facilities are here, at the heart of what we are is a development program. And it's all about teaching and bringing back, these individuals who started here, have gone and done great things, and for them to know that they can give back to the next generation. And so what happens is, as a player, obviously I didn't play here at Guelph, and I actually competed against Guelph for a long time. But once you join the program, you realize what makes it special or what makes it unique. And we want to lean into those things. So how often do you get an NFL player coming back and willing to give back? And I can say this, I'll shout this from the mountaintops. From the day I met Tavius in 2019 to the day now, where obviously you see the success, the core value of who he is hasn't changed, which is amazing. AJ as well. AJ Allen was a Burlington native where I'm from, and Mem Robinson. He comes back and gives back so much of his time, and he wants to support the next generation. And so if anybody's listening to this and they're like, well, what makes Guelph special? Everybody sees what we portray on social media, which is a part of it. What we try to keep secret, which is no longer, I think, going to be a secret, is we're a development program. We are going to coach the players. We're going to give them everything we have in terms of access to resources, of coaching, teaching former players. When Eric Starshala, who's here on campus, can give back to the offensive line along with Coach Mike and all the different things, well, that only benefits the program. And so we need to find more opportunities for them to grow and develop. And that's really what it's about. The off season is the only place where people can do whatever they want differently, right? The season is where things start to become more homogeneic, I guess you could call it, or more, similar. Whereas this is where you really start to make, for bad pun, make your mark on how do you want to coach it? How do you want to build culture? What do you want to instill values wise? And where the players can really thrive. So, yeah.
When you'd mentioned sort of the shakeup of the OUA in terms of just some of the kind of legacy figures moving on or moving into different spots. And, of course, you mentioned Coach Marshall's name, and I love the adoration that you would and the respect that you had shared for him. I mean, it's kind of fascinating to think amongst all the amazing things of your football life, you'll now be like the answer to a great trivia question down the line of like, who was the head coach to have handed Greg Marshall his final loss? That's you, sir, and we'll certainly get into that game. Of course, it was great. We had you on the show previewing the Eights Cup, and I think we talked a little bit about how the season came to an end, but we wanted to keep it focused on Queens Laurier. But, you mentioned Coach Lang giving you that piece of advice of not letting a moment go by to learn a lesson from the year that had gone by and then put into practice. What were the key lessons or sort of the main lesson of last year? Because in so many ways, and it's odd, it seems like it's been a trend, though I don't know what you really chalk it up to, of just some bad injury luck. And of course, any coach worth their salt isn't going to stop at being like, well, we got injured, even though Ken, you could just like say that very well, and it would be just the truth of the matter. But going beyond that uncontrollable fact to whatever extent we have some control in that as coaches, what was the main lesson or lessons from last year?
Yeah, I think if we were to chalk it up to just injuries, it's too simplistic, and it actually goes kind of against what. So you think about it as coaches, you have core values, right? And so while yes, there is some, I guess, luck or chance in injuries, we also can't hide from the fact that we were the number 2 most penalized team in the country. There are base fundamental things that we need to get better at, and we have a really, I think, talented team. I'll be the first to talk about how proud I am of the team that we've built and the players that we have. But it starts with looking inward and say, well, am I, as the head coach, putting in enough time for us to teach the game of football? Right? So there's so many nuances to it. There's so many things. How do you fit in special teams, percentage versus offense versus defense, all these different things. And that's why I give credit to guys like Coach Shane and Coach Marshall, who figured out that formula, and they've had successful teams wherever they've gone. And it's not by chance. It's because they know exactly what they're looking for. And I've said this the day I got hired to where it is now. Coach Barry's been a defensive coordinator for a long time. Coach Joe's been recruiting for 10 plus years. You look at Coach Carter, he's been a special teams coordinator now for a very long time. I'm the one that's new as the head coach. And so you're learning how can I do a better job steering the ship to put our players in a position to learn from the past, to continue to get better, and to highlight the things that we need to continue to improve on to give ourselves a better chance to be successful. even things like everybody says, okay, be process oriented versus outcome, right? So this is the one of the few professions or things where you have a scoreboard every week. Okay. And that scoreboard sometimes tells the truth, but often what it is a reflection of what happens in the game. And there are critical moments that, as long as we continue to coach our players, really fun stat that I love to talk about. So you get a penalty on a return, and everybody thinks, oh, that's a 15-yard penalty. It's actually in some cases a 50 or 60-yard penalty because not only do you go 15 yards back, you lose the return. So we were a very good return team last year. Well, we're losing an opportunity to gain field position, which then sets the offense back, which then means the punt turns the defense back. So it's like interconnected game. And some of the best teachers that I've been around, I'll use, Coach O'Shea as an example. He teaches everything from A to Z. Substitution patterns, how much time can you take, all these different things. And when you get access to coaches like that or other coaches like I've mentioned, well, you start to see those little areas that they gain advantages, which over the course of a season turns into the multiple Yates Cups and Vanier Cups that those two gentlemen, Coach Marshall and Coach Shane, have won. And for me, it's about learning that rhythm or learning those values to then, share that with the players to give them the best chance to be successful. So it was always about penalties, number one. How do we teach the game better? How do we coach football better? Fundamentals. Everybody says, hey, let's focus on fundamentals. But as an offensive coordinator, I can tell you, one of your favorite things, you draw plays, you drop this amazing motion, you do all these fancy things, and it looks really cool. But if we can't, if we can't tackle, if we can't block, if we can't protect the football, well, what does all of that really mean? And I'll tell you, as a younger coach, when you reflect back, you don't realize how lucky you are that somebody else takes care of some of that thought process, right? So Coach Fall is a great, good friend of mine. I got to go in the lab. I got to draw the crazy plays. I got to do all the fun things, figure out how to get Curly the ball or hand the ball off to Dylan Campbell and all these things. And, that's early in my career. But what I was lost on me was, like the fundamental skill development, he's built time in. And we're purposeful. And you're coaching football in a way that may seem boring at first, but turns into successful teams. And so when you get a chance to be the head coach, nobody gives you a manual. Nobody tells you, hey, this is how it is. And the best ones can figure out on the fly, like, oh, this is what I'm about. And so that's been the most exciting process for me, is saying, well, how do we rethink the game? I love being challenged and asking questions and thinking, okay, well, is this the way we have to do it, or is there a better way? Because now, like, just think about coaching, information isn't the issue. Any coach can go online and find a playbook. Any coach can go online and find a play. You can go on YouTube right now and look up how to teach outside zone, how to teach inside zone, how to do this, how to do that. So the information or access to it is no longer the kind of stopgap or the faucet or the thing you're trying to learn. Can you coach it? Can you teach it? Can you explain where it comes from? Can you explain the base fundamental things? And how can you call it in a sequence that makes sense to the players? So coaching is flipped a complete 180 to where 15 years ago, you couldn't find a playbook. You had to watch film and try to, find things like that. There wasn't people on YouTube doing coaches clinics and doing all these things. And the cool clinic, which everybody goes to and watches, wasn't, online yet, to where now you can find somebody to teach you every single technique part, but do you know it well enough to then teach it and coach it with your players? And so that's where coaching has become so different in the last 5 to 6 years, where, every coach in our league watches Dan Casey, for anybody who's on Twitter. Well, great. Those are one-offs. How does it fit within the grand scheme of things? And well, they are fun and cool. And we have used the occasional trick play, and we have used things that people may not be ready for. But it's got to fit within the larger scheme of how you want to run the team, and how do you talk about all three facets? How do they fit together? What's your strategy for winning the game? And is every coach on the same page as to what that week's game plan is? So pretty detailed answer, and I don't know if you got anything out of it, but it's interesting. It's an interesting time in the profession.
Work on the fundamentals. That's the lesson.
Yeah.
Long way of saying work on tackling, blocking, and protecting the football. There you go.
Oh, but it's so true. There's so much information that's out there. You can look up any individual aspect of the game, how to huddle up or how to run this play. It's up to you and up to the coaches to put it all together and put it into a way that makes sense for the players and a message that they can understand and get behind. And I know that you want to build everything around those fundamentals and continue to grow off of that, but I think it's worth noting that Zach and I were real champions of this team, and we recognize the immense talent that you do have here. But when you can't win, you can't win without your starters. That's just a true fact of everything here, and I understand that. But like, couple of that with one of, if not the most difficult schedule last year that you could think of here, against Laurier, at Western, at Windsor, against Ottawa, at Mac, at Carleton, against Queens at home, and York at home to finish off the regular season. That is a gauntlet, especially with a week 7 bye week to end all of that off. And you have an incredibly tight game against Laurier, so much so that I came out of that and I said to multiple people, Laurier versus Guelph, this is going to be the Yates Cup. I am fully confident in that. That was a phenomenal game. Cal is obviously getting into his rhythm, whatever, but like, you guys are out firing up from the hip. And then at Western, like, everything that could go wrong seemed like it went wrong. Both of your quarterbacks get injured in that game. You have guys that are coming out constantly. The game plan has completely changed. Marshall McRae is now in there just running around the entire Western defense and making things work. But from a head coaching standpoint, you obviously, going into the season, you can see the potential that's here. You can see the talent that's here. You lose a very close game to Laurier, but certainly anybody who's looking around has got to be thinking, hey, we've got something here. And then to have Western happen, like, that's not even just the loss to Western, but the injuries that happen here. How do you then right the ship to travel down to the end of the 401 and pick up a convincing victory against Windsor? That is a very easy spot for teams to just spiral down into, and you and the rest of that staff obviously are able to get the win in Windsor. So how do you course correct and get back to what works and getting into staying out of 0-3 to start the season?
Yeah, it's so funny. Everyone looks at the year last year, and of course I'll be the first to say we underachieved, but a lot of the work we put in was around the culture of the team and how do you deal with adversity. And so you look at that Laurier team, extremely talented, right? It was a barn burner. Tristan threw a Hail Mary at the end of the game. Do we have a chance to win? All those things. Okay, great. Well, close only works in horseshoes and hand grenades, as they say. Okay. You go down and you play, a really, really good Western team. Another close one where Marshall does a great job. You're balancing the players, all those things. And in years past, I think it would have been difficult to come back because going down to Windsor, Coach Cercelli does an amazing job, and they're a tough team. It's a physical game. And many people don't know, actually, we lost our fullback who got ejected in the first quarter. And shout out to Isaiah Smith, who's at the combine. Mm-hmm. He played fullback that game, or H-back, with no reps during the week.
Wow.
So you look at those things, and there's two ways you can kind of view the same event. You can say, well, why is this happening to us? Like, why do we deserve this? Or you can say, well, what's our way to band together and figure out a solution? Figure out how can we come back together as a team and find a way to be successful. And so even in that game, at the end of half, Windsor throws an interception on the goal line. Anakin Guthrie takes it all the way back. I won't name names, but the head of officiating calls me the next day and say, "Hey, that block behind may not have been a block behind. Could have been a score." But even coming out of it, it doesn't really matter because we don't control those things. So as a coach, it forces you to confront, like, are you going to be about the values you talk about, or is the first sign of adversity, are you going to fold in on those things? And so we like to use the analogy, like, let's not ride the roller coaster. Okay, let's not go up and down, up and down. We're going to have bumps along the road, some peaks, some valleys, but those peaks and valleys got to be as close to each other as possible. And so when you face a difficult schedule or you face those things, well, there's no point in litigating, oh, I can't believe we have to start off with this or that. It's okay. These guys are on the schedule. How do we figure out a chance to be successful? And what's crazy, like, most of the people listening to this, you think about the teams, okay, and you think about Queens or Laurier or Western, and you have this idea of what that school is about. And then you take the football side in, and now each football team is such an embodiment of that staff and that head coach. And so you start to realize what each team's values are, and you'll see like, oh, I understand that they're like this because of their coaching staff. And so for anybody who's listening, you think, oh, I want to go to this school because this is what they've been about for 50 years. Well, let's be honest, the coaching staff is very different. The football is very different. And it's recruits' jobs to figure out, hey, what is it that that coach cares about and how does that fit the values that I have? Because I tell this to every recruit, all 27 teams in the country, they have staffs and coaches who care about them. So that's not usually the differentiating factor. Every single coach in this country cares about their team and wants to give them the best chance. But like I say, there's a different football experience wherever you go. And so you need to figure out what's really important to you and how does that match up as it relates to what you're talking about. Well, are we going to be about managing adversity? Are we going to be about banding together? Are we not going to turn in on ourselves? And if we are, well, how does that get embodied through the trials and tribulations we have? How do we talk to each other as coaches? The one thing I'll say about this staff, we always say we're going to challenge each other all the time internally, and we're going to have those conversations. But when we go out and we play a team or we're in practice, we are one unit. We are aligned in what we care about and what we're doing. And credit to the group, like 3 and 5, yeah, not ideal, but you figured out that we're pretty resilient. And so you look across throughout the whole year, all these different situations, it'd be easy to fall apart. But you can see that our team doesn't, and they fight and they claw and they play. And once we settle down with the nerves, we can be pretty good. And so how do we everybody will say, well, first quarters, we start slow. I understand. So we're trying to do everything we can to start faster. But also credit to those coaches. They've been at the dance a long time. That Western team, Evan Hillock, how many games has he played in the playoffs? How many games has, that core, EJ, Laomi, all these players, how many games have they played in those big spots? Justin Pace, Vreekin, all these great players, they've been there. I think we're the new ones to the dance a little bit, and we haven't been in those big spots, which isn't an excuse. We need to get better at that. But we also need to be a good team so that we're there more often. It doesn't become such a big event. And now our expectations change, right? And so we can practice and play up to the level that I think we can achieve, which is what we're looking for.
Well, I think you using that word resilience really does reflect a lot of major moments in the season, specifically starting the year and ending the year with Laurier. Unfortunate is that both of them ended up in losses, and both of them being games where, a slow start they both were, but prompted some pretty exciting football. And on the one hand, like Tom and I always go back and forth on the way certain teams utilize multiple quarterbacks, and Guelph as a program when you were on the staff, but before even taking over, was doing so in a very chaotic fashion. It felt like at times that I wasn't a big fan of, but I wasn't a big fan of other aspects of the team at that time. I guess that's all I'll say. But clearly it's what you've been able to manufacture works really well. And I think what's so amazing about both those comebacks that came up short is that in the first one, you already mentioned what Aboud was able to put together, and I have the numbers in front of me. Ends up putting up 407 yards and 2 touchdowns in the air, adds in almost 100 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. And then you fast forward however many months, weeks later, in that OUA semifinal game, where again the first half is just feeling like, man, the excitement of that Western game, all the kind of is a newish program with you coming in, a lot of youth in the program in different areas, and all this, that, and the third. But then Marshall McRae puts up 272 in the air with 3 touchdowns and then 108 yards and a rushing touchdown as well, which, again, there's certain teams and programs that I don't love the way they necessarily move around quarterbacks, but no one can do what you do with your quarterbacks in being able to have, again, against one of the perennial best teams in the whole nation, including on the road in the semifinals of the provincial championship, being able to do this with 2 different quarterbacks and in seemingly different styles in the way that they approach the game, which is just so fascinating and such a testament, I think, to you and your offensive staff and everyone there, and being able to, again, bring those 2 young men together and being able to leverage what they both do best to be able to put them in situations to have success.
Yeah, a very creative way of bringing this up. I think that's a great your job. I think every coach in the country, that listens to this or looks at our situation, anybody who complains about having two top end quarterbacks, they would be getting on the phone right now and be like, okay, give us your situation then right now if you're complaining. So I have zero complaints about the way that those two young men have interacted, how they're great teammates, how they support it. And it goes back to what I talked about previously. Everybody can get on the same page if it's for the good of the team. That's what I've experienced. And so when you look at it, let's not just take the quarterback position. Let's take every position at skill on offense. Isaiah Smith, Donovan Malloy, Caleb Sargent, Mason Duval last year. The list can continue to You can go on and on and on. And so, when you look at it, it is new for me, and how you manage the personalities and or the immense skill level you have. In my opinion, I would rather us try to manage all the players and how do we build together than to have less talent and say, okay, well, don't come here because you're in a competition. In my mind, the way that we're going to, and it goes back to the relationships part, if we invest in every player and we get them to be as good as they could possibly be, as close to their potential, on great teams, the best teams in the history of this sport, they sacrifice. You go through any single team. Sometimes the league leaders are not the ones that actually end up, winning the prize at the end. And so you can go through all the Vanity Cup teams. There are people that sacrifice for the good of the group, guys who do those amazing things. That's what it's got to be as long as I'm here. Because at the end of the day, we're going to build the best team possible, but it's going to be built through that team first culture. And I'm so proud of the players you mentioned because they embody that team first culture. Whether it's run down on special teams, whether it's doing all these different things or whatever it is, playing quarterback, playing running back, you can see that, of course, the ego part of every player wants to say, hey, I want to be the guy. But you can really find a way to be successful if everybody buys into the same thing. Now, it's easy to say. It's easy to talk about, hey, we got to be on the same page. Well, how do you really build it? How do you embody it? What does that look like? Right? There's a secret sauce to the relationship, which is if you invest in them as people and you know that their best interests are at heart, not just on the field, but off the field, well, okay, there's a reason that everybody wants to be together. But that's a 365 a day job, which is really what we're talking about here. I want every player who comes through here and graduates knows that for their short period of time, we're going to give them every opportunity to be as great as they could possibly be. Because if they're given that opportunity here when they graduate, they'll go back to their communities and this is the experience they've had. Think about all these positive experiences they can then bring back, like you two, coaching, giving back. Well, because of your positive experiences that you've had, now think of all the people that have been coached, that have been given this amazing gift of football because of those experiences. And so if we start there, no play, no strategy, no game plan is going to replace that. Well, that's where you start and you build out to the other things to say, hey, well, I'm sure the question everybody asks is who's going, who's leaving, who's here, who's there, who's doing this, who's doing that. We try to stay away from those things and we focus on how do we invest in the players every single day so that at the end of it, when I put my head on a pillow, we'll laugh. We have a saying here, when I put my head on a pillow, have I done everything possible to put the players in a position to be successful? And if we haven't, we need to change that tomorrow and we do it step by step. And then you stack up the days and then, like we mentioned, sport's amazing because you're not promised anything. Injuries can happen, penalties, this, that, the other, but at least you've done everything in your power to give the players the best chance to have that amazing experience. So that's really what we focus on at every position and try to be as transparent and open as possible, but also let them know like, hey, this is what you're here for. So,
And I think there's a lot of folks, and again, I feel like there's some of this that we're just going back on where you're like, yeah, it's not about this. And then we continue to bring it up about what it is, like the injuries. And I will say it isn't about who's moving on, but it kind of is going into this year, especially.
yeah.
But when you look at this from the outside, looking in, I don't ever think that people are going into this being like, oh, there's windows here or whatever is this Guelph's window or anything else along those lines. But certainly when you're looking at some of the pieces that you have, obviously Aboud and McRae and what's going with there, the running backs and everything else. But it was that offensive line last year arguably one of, if not the best in the entire country when fully healthy. Those guys up front are truly incredible. And I think that was a big catalyst to Zach and I. Zach was, I don't know, both of us were looking at this being like, is this a chance for Guelph to get into a Vanier Cup type of deal? Because we see the talent, we see everything else. Now, a very strong, an absolute chance that 4 out of the 5 are gone, and a very strong chance that Mitch Schretchinger, who is the 5th, is going to stick in the CFL because of the talent that he has. A very young group of guys up front to start things off here, but when you've got one of the best coaching offensive line coaches out there in Coach Mike McDonald, you don't, even though it's a very young group with some first years and second years and whoever else, I feel like the tension goes down a little bit because you got a guy like that. And I said this to Zach earlier. I think I said this to you. I want to say it out here so that everybody can listen. It looks like, be at least in the conversation of who's going to be starting whatever else, Riley Thompson and Gavin Spears are in that conversation. In the next 2 to 3 years, the two of them will be the best tackles in all of the OUA and potentially U Sports. The potential that this group has is enormous, but obviously the playing experience is next to none across anybody who would be starting in this. How do you level set what you have up front compared to, you talked about it, how much fun it is to draw up plays and do everything else? Well, when you don't have that experience, when you have guys that are still learning the game or the speed of the game itself, you obviously need to say, okay, maybe we don't do the triple reverse double action play action where we need 10 seconds to throw the ball, but you're not just going in for, hey, maybe we can get to 500. Like every year is a year for you to win a championship. So how do you level set with a young, youthful group on that offensive line and elsewhere, but also saying, we understand this is here, but we still have to compete at the highest level?
Yeah. So a couple of things I want to talk about, obviously. I think it's great to have, like we always say here, yes, we have a goal. It's pretty clear. All 27 teams have a goal to win the Vanier Cup. Okay, so let's not shy away from what the goals are. It's good to talk about those things, but we're not outcome oriented. Okay. So Tom, I'm going to use a few names. Hopefully this makes my point. I like to use analogies for anybody who knows me.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Dennison, 2-time Heck Crichton Award winner at Queens. How are we going to replace him? What's going to happen? How do you replace a 2-time Heck Crichton Award winner? Well, a guy named Danny Brannigan comes in and does pretty good. Oh my God, Danny. How are you going to replace him? Well, Billy McPhee comes in. Well, he was pretty good. What about Nate Hobbs? So how are we going to replace Billy? Well, Nate Hobbs comes in. And so you could do this for every program. How are you going to replace Michael Fultz? Well, Donnie Marshall. Well, how do you replace Donnie Marshall? Oh, well, just a guy named Chris Merchant, right? Like there's all these places. And so we talk to our guys all the time. There are all-stars waiting to be found on every single roster. And so the point of collegiate athletics is you're going to graduate. You're going to do great things in life after you're done. Well, guys, the football doesn't stop. There's just another guy who comes in and now is given the opportunity. And that's the way we look at it is, are you ready for your opportunity when it comes? Okay. And that's the part where when I look at the commonality at that position, and both of you know this man very well, Coach Mike McDonald, Coach Brian Clough. Well, yes, it's Guelph, of course. But what is it about Guelph? Well, if you talk about those coaches, you can go through the names regardless of the generation. So unless something's changed in the last 20 minutes since I last talked to him, Coach Mike's still here. Coach Eric Starshell's still here. And that development program that comes from a Coulter or from the guys that we've all talked about, well, it's just their time to shine or their opportunity to show what they could do. And are they ready? Is their preparation going to meet that opportunity? That's really what it's about. And so I think what we struggled with last year, my first year here, there was no expectations. So we played like there was no expectations. It was fun. We were slinging the ball around. People were having fun. What a great experience. When there's no expectations, it's easy. That's why when you look at the best teams like a Coach Marshall coach team, they're expected to win every year and they meet those expectations. Well, pressure is a funny thing. It either bursts pipes or makes diamonds. And sometimes it takes going through those hard experiences to figure out, okay, this is what we need to do. So those names you mentioned, we try not to talk about what their futures look like, and we try to stay in the present. And so while I am very flattered by your assessment of them, I think we need to take it day by day. And as you know, with the offensive line, it's a 5-man unit. And the best thing is they got a guy back there catching the snap, someone to hand the ball off to, and five guys to catch it. Where if we need a little bit of time to develop, well, we can figure out what the best way is because that offensive line that you mentioned carried some of the young receivers or skill players that we've had in the past to allow us the time to get them, to be successful, whether it's Fashawn or Kane or all the guys that we've had since we've been here. So in that way, yes, when you look at it on paper, and thank God the games aren't played on paper, there is going to be a step down. How do you replace five fourth year or fifth year seniors? You don't replace them. You figure out what the next strategy is. How do you change the play calling? How do you change the development? How do you get them more time? And rather than say, oh, well, let's wait for 2 years, you embrace that opportunity to refresh and say, okay, it's going to look different, right? Like as a coach, you need to be good enough to adapt the system to fit the players you have. Okay. Or if the players don't fit, what a great opportunity for a coach to say, well, that guy's not good enough. We cannot do that here. That is not part of our vocabulary. You can't run the same thing over and over again if you don't have the same players. So we need to be good enough as coaches to say, what do we have? How do we put them in a position to succeed? Okay. And it goes right back to how you view offense or defense. So if you look at it last year, shout out to him, Josh Misnagi, fifth year H-back. In the last couple games, his catches went way up, right? So we were able to do more things with him. And if you told me that he would have caught those balls, well, I would have said you're crazy in his first year. But you learn as a coach, hey, why would we put parameters on the players? Why would you say what this guy can and cannot do? Let's highlight the things they can do and keep them out of situations where, it's difficult. The defenses in this league are very good. I will say this as an OUA supporter because I know my colleagues in the Can West and the RCQ and every single conference in the country will say, well, the OUA, this, that, you got week this, week that. Show me a different league where you're going to see double tight, 3 running backs to empty, to this, to that. As a defensive coordinator in this league, it's a nightmare. You have to prep for 4 different styles of offense in the same year. Okay, you've got the empty York, U of T, that's a very difficult thing to play against. Then you've got the Western Tree, which is 2-back, amazing run game, paired up with play action and different versions of that. Then you've got, the pro style offense. I'm very proud, kind of supportive of the Pache and Tree, obviously. But then you've got Marcel, who does an amazing job with offense at Ottawa. And so when you look at it, or Steph and Corey, who come from sort of that same, like Coach Galley, how do you separate all these things? Well, as a defensive coordinator in this league, it's a nightmare because you're not getting the same things over and over again. So you need to teach your players how to play empty, 1-back, 2-back, 3-back. Okay, well, show me the league that you do that in. Not to say that the other leagues aren't super talented and the colleagues in those leagues are also very, very good. It's just a function of having the number of teams that we have where it's not the easiest thing. And I don't know if I'm breaking news on this podcast or not, but we've gone to a new scheduling system where there's going to be rotating non-combatants. So you're never going to have a situation where you miss multiple teams over the 5 years. Credit to the coaches in this country where we said we need to get to a point where people can circle games on the calendar. Hey, that's coming. Hey, we don't have this team this year. So yes, everybody's going to talk about how the 2 Yates Cup teams aren't playing this year. Okay, yes, that is not best when you talk about scheduling. However, that means they're not going to miss each other for the next 5 years. And so you sacrifice for some of the administrators hey, strength of schedule, all this stuff, but you now know who your opponents are and you can create those rivalry games or those scheduling fun activities where now hey, I am playing. We don't play Western this year. Okay, well, I know I'm getting for the next 5 years, right? And you rotate through because it speaks to the strength of our league where there are no longer, from a few years ago, the 70-0 blowouts or not nearly as much. And every coach is a competitive game where any team can win and any team can lose every week.
Well, again, I can go all day, I'm sure, as you can, just speaking Stu Lang-isms, but one of the ones that I love most that I think reflected part of what you talked about in terms of that first year with the expectations that he had said to me about being privileged to have won an unsung hero award my first year at Guelph was that you can only be unsung at one time. And so once you're on the stage and people know you, the cat's out of the bag. And as you said about expectations, it's amazing what that all brings up. I want to talk about the receiving core, and you mentioned how that piece on, well, if the O line's now a bit younger, well, those skill guys got to now be the ones to carry maybe them in that transition the way that they did and vice versa. But, we finished by talking defenses. And so I think I want to actually go there and talk about Coach Barry's defense. We talked about that stellar play that was or was not, I suppose, of, Anakin Skywalker Guthrie, the crown prince of Guelph. And amazing to think that, again, based on years of service, he might be done, which is just remarkable to think about, because I just think of him as like this young boy, like forever in my mind, and thought if he's finished his U Sports career, or potentially has, is remarkable. Obviously, guys like Demetrius Masuka, who came in a little banged up, but a great addition from Mac, a captain in Lafoucade. Again, some of these older guys in that secondary. But to me, the thing that I am so excited about, and yes, knock on wood, everything about injuries, so on and so forth. But, for starters, obviously, my guy and Andre Thompson, just seeing him further developing. I was kind of saying to Tom, like, he's just such a phenom at the high school level and OSFL level that I think, even though he didn't look like a rookie, no doubt he probably had some of those moments of being like, all right, now I know what it takes to really be at this level, and I'm excited to see how that growth can continue. Obviously, a guy like Keys Wilson on that D-line as well, but that linebacking core you have, again, injuries being the bugaboo they can be, but guys like Eunice Larry and Braden McDougall and Jack Cobb and Javon Jacobson and Nicholas Metzcon and Maddox Martin, like kind of as like that's two cores worth of players there. And again, the way that we got to learn in watching Coach Barry work his system with, in his 2-3 years now, I don't remember the number, but in that he obviously rotates those guys in, which takes getting used to. But clearly, when you have the wealth of talent there, like you can't just say, here's the 12 we run with them, when you have another 5-6 deep on the bench that you can just be able to say, and I mean, obviously I don't know how a system works in and out, but being able to say, well, this is a package based on, as you alluded to, the empty offense we're facing versus the two back versus the double tight, where now all of a sudden this is where Metzcon and Maddox, that they're going to get like a lot of run here because of this matchup. Or, you know what, actually we're just going to let Eunice Larry just patrol the middle because he's such a phenomenal athlete that we can maybe get an extra DB on it. Like, that core you have is so immense, and just the versatility of athletes in there, to me, is what makes it so special, where it's not just like the old school linebackers that we played against, of just like downhill runners. These are guys that will go sideline to sideline, can get into coverage, and it's just really exciting to think of that as, along with some other key players, like I said, on that D line as well, and no doubt in the secondary, but to build a defense that does use so much substitution around a deep linebacking core to begin with.
Yeah, I think being multiple, obviously, as you've seen, he's had a ton of success everywhere he's been, and part of that is the multiplicity that you talk about. A unique thing that nobody thinks about prior to this year, so obviously Coach Barry had Coach Harris, amazing coach, as the person to kind of ping pong off of, but he's been sharing, well, I haven't had a full-time assistant in that role, and now he comes here and he has one for every position. So what does that mean? Well, hey, I'll be the first to admit, when you have, of course, it sounds like, I'm sure all the coaches will say, well, you're crying about having full-time assistants every position. What was you? But part of it is, how do you communicate in a way that now the filtration goes through that position coach? And we look to the NCAA or the pros, to where, if you look at the NCAA rosters, you got 14 coaches. There's an outside linebackers coach, there's an inside linebackers coach, there's all these things. But if we're really talking about excellence in this country, which is obviously Coach Lang's big term, well, having really great coaches, like a Zach Colangelo, who's joined us this year at the linebacking core, a Tanner Hamada, who runs the back end of the DBs, Coach Clough, legend, and Coach Cap, also, as you guys know, great defensive line coaches. Well, we now need to figure out a system that's unique to this country and, collegiate athletics, where not every program has that. So I can tell you this, when I first started coaching, there used to be just 3 full-time coaches, the head coach, the 2 coordinators, and you roll, and that's what you have. Well, now it's very different, where you need to find a way to maximize the efficiency. And also, Coach Barry coming from Canada West, like I mentioned, there's going to be a learning curve. And as you saw, our defense got better and better and better. The pinnacle really being that Western game with a top I was laughing. For nobody who understands, I think Western rushed for something like 300 yards a game last year. I think
Mhm.
three or maybe 280. I can't remember what it was. But they rushed for more yards than some teams had total offense. So we're talking about one of the, Ethan Dolby broke the single season rushing record in Western history. Okay, like we're talking about a place that, so when our defense goes in and plays as well as they do, well, that's not through osmosis or like, hey, they figured it out. That's coaching and that's development. And so we talk about the linebacking core. Yes, the names you mentioned, very positive. Javon Jacobson, I feel very strongly is the leader of that group and will, is not, if he's not already a star. But the best thing about him is he's humble and he wants to play with all of his friends and he wants to coach and do those things and be together. So great. The defensive line is unbelievable. So for anybody who likes, I like to call it inside baseball, but our recruiting class from last year was 33 off the top of my head, if I remember correctly, and some really top end guys. So Andre is one name that everybody will know. And by the way, Jackson McKay, great player, 2-time rookie of the year in two different sports. But I will go on this hill that I think Dre
Yeah.
making the impact that
Yeah.
he did at the defensive line spot. Show me somebody who can do
Get
that.
him,
So
coach.
I'm going to say he should have been the OUA Rookie of the Year, which may have turned into something else. But I'm always going to go to bat for a guy.
Let's
But
go.
other names that people don't know and seen, Max Matrolo, who was an OHL draft pick, who's now playing defensive end. Dennis Duskin, another name. Toomey Adeniyi, which not very many people talk about him, but if you watch his tape last year, for the people that know, Robbie Keys, all these things. Well, you talked about the quarterbacks, receivers before. You could roll out defensive linemen as well, and when they're healthy and they're fresh, well, that's when you see the defense you're starting to build. So, I think there was a quote previously. For anybody who's watched it, Kim Mulkey, who's the head coach at LSU women's basketball, they were asking her, "Oh, you had success at Baylor. What's the take in here? Why mimic that success?" And she said, "Well, how long has Gino Auriemma been at UConn? How long has Don Staley been at South Carolina?" It's like greatness takes time. Like let's give these kids a little bit of time to develop and not think that let's make sure everybody understands that the coaches in this league are very strong and they're talented. That it's going to take time. You don't just snap your finger and all of a sudden everybody's there. So I do feel like we're at that conversation now. And we used this term last year. I think it might have been a year early. Pressure is a privilege. Okay, if you're expected to win, that means you've put the time and the work in and there's the talent there. So don't look at that as like an anxiety inducing, hey, oh, what does it mean now? We're on top, big game. It's a privilege to be viewed as one of a possible team who could win. Okay. But that's not success. That's not anything other than obviously great minds like yourself drumming up support for the game that we all love. Internally, you're as good as your record. And what's our record? We're a 3-5 team that made it to the OUA semifinals. And as long as we don't forget that, well, the work ethic and the values that we have will continue to be shown through all the things we do. So that's a long way of saying we have great players. I'm very happy with the team that we have. And I can't wait to see them compete in the fall and see us compete in the fall. And, I do feel like we're right in that precipice of getting over the edge. So.
Well, listen, for the folks who are listening here, I hope it now makes more and more sense why 2 years ago, Zach and I were championing you to be the OUA Coach of the Year with all the things that you're doing. You flip that team around your first year and everything, but it's the culture that you're talking about. It's the base that you're talking about and building off from there. The names that you just listed off as the coaches, Matt Barry, Joe Cap, Donovan Carter, Joe DeMore, all head coaching caliber. All of them could go out and be a head coach at an OUA school and find success. And the fact that they are all here under one roof, working together, trying to make everybody else better is certainly one of the greatest advantages that Guelph has going into anywhere. And like you said, there's great coaches and phenomenal coaches everywhere, but that doesn't diminish the great coaches that you guys have in the house, in-house, in the building, not just those guys who are good quality head coaches, but your positional coaches like Mike McDonald, like Brian Clough, like all of these guys, Alex Charette. There's a number of really, really talented people in that building who are only looking to get people better and better as things go on. And it's why every single year, Zach and I are going to be really excited about the potential of where Guelph can go and where the Gryphons can go. But exactly like that, and you've mentioned this previously here as well, when you have some of the best facilities, when you have some of the best people, when you have all of these things, expectations now start to become a part of that, and pressure starts to become a part of that. Whether it's from the outside, like a couple of schmucks like we are talking about it, or if it's inside the building and people are looking around being like, hey, he's pretty good. Hey, well, our quarterbacks are pretty good here. Hey, I think the stat, if I did my research properly, when all three of your running backs last year, or any year, in Caleb Sargent, Isaiah Smith, and Donovan Malloy, if all three of them are healthy and finish a game, you have not ever lost a game like that. I think that's the stat going through, but those guys have been injured and they've been back and forth, whatever. But again, it speaks to the talent that you have. And obviously, when you've got talent, we've got facilities, when you've got all of these things, expectation has to be there. So how does the team, and how do you specifically deal with pressure and expectations and wanting to win and needing to win, while also, exactly like you're saying, taking a step back and saying, okay, well, how do we win March 29th? How do we win that day before we win the Vanier Cup and doing anything else? What's that mentality? What does that take to get everybody on that same page?
Yeah, I think I don't know. Maybe I mean, it's no secret. I'll let a cat out of the bag, but I do believe all those names you just mentioned, they should be sought after for jobs in this country, whether it's at this level or in the pros. So, Coach Shan goes to Calgary. Thank you to him for giving me this opportunity here, and which turned into this amazing thing. But when I look at it all, it's almost you're like, well, this is going to come. I just know how good of coaches they are. So when you talk about culture and things that you're discussing like this, the only way that all of us are going to want to stay together is if you build an environment where you feel like you get to focus on football and you get to focus on the things that we all love doing. Right? So Coach Barry, Coach Cap, all the coaches you mentioned, Coach Carter, all of them. Any team should be calling me and saying, hey, I'd love to interview him for an opportunity to be the head coach. And I'll be the first to say, I can say it here, I'll say it anywhere, I support their upward mobility. How can I help them? How can we do this? Because at the end of the day, the players will understand that if you're a tight-knit family as a coaching staff, well, now that's the expectation everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, it's funny to say, well, all these great coaches, how do you win this? And the expectations, well, you bring in great people. You bring in awesome coaches. And you let them do what they're best at. This is not my team. As weird as I know sometimes that's being said, whether it's social media and the work that our amazing group does. I told them, and this is a back and forth that we've had, don't make it about me. Don't make it about my account or my preferences or my style or what music I like or this or that or what photos I like to have. We have experts. They're experts. Like I tell them all the time, hey, no offense to you, I'm not calling you on 2nd and 6 on the 37-yard line. What's the best play to get us into field goal range? So when you say, hey, coach, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Let's put great people in a position to succeed. And so when you're coaching with great people, my job is to ask questions, to create the environment where they can be successful, to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? What about this? What's the strategy here? That's really all it is. But at the same time, they're hired here for a reason. There are people that should want them for a reason. So if I go in and say, okay, hey, what are we doing here? You need to play this guy, that guy, do this, do that. Well, then that's my fault. I'm the one who brought everybody in. Let's let them do what they do best. Okay? And so we talk about culture. We're not trying to paint everybody with the same picture. We need to embrace and meet people where they are. Some of the players we have, he'll get a chuckle at this. Keandre Smith is he's one of my favorite players ever to coach, because if you ever met Keandre, he would take every rep in practice. He would take every rep in scout team. He would take every rep on special teams and every rep on scout special teams. He loves football. Now, the hard part is Keandre wants to dominate all aspects of that. And then when it comes to other parts, well, we know we've worked with him on while he was here. There's always that, like, when I think back to it, it's like he's great at doing those things. So how do we highlight those strengths and help him attack those weaknesses? You put Keandre up on a field against anybody, it doesn't matter who it is, that competitive fire is going to come out. Devin Cromwell, graduate of this program, okay, or you went here, all those things. Him and Keandre would, in the offseason, sprint head-to-head every single day. And I can tell you, Devin, if he was healthy for the U Sports Combine, for the CFL Combine, would have ran a 4.3. I'm not saying that facetiously. Okay. Him and I have a little bit of a wager. Said if you ran a specific time, sub 4-4, I would take him to any steakhouse in the city, him and Miles. Okay. So any team that drafts them, you're gonna get a player that is unbelievable. But I don't remember many times that Keandre lost the sprints. So you don't play football, you know, the thing about football players is there's so many things that can make you great. That's why our sport's awesome. You can be big, you can be small. You can be tall, you can be short. You can be all these different things, and greatness comes in all packages. So let's take the coaches. Well, coaches come in all packages. So when it comes to culture, how do you highlight those things? Give them the time and the instruction and the really just the environment to help them be the best coaches, which they are, and work with the players. And you do those things, well, when the 28th team that gets created calls me and says, hey, I want these coaches, I'll be first to say you'll be lucky if you get them because that's how good of a coach they are. And the only reason or the only way that we're going to be able to keep everybody together is if you're like, you know what, I'm getting something at Guelph I can't get anywhere else. I get to, it's not a surprise. If you look at Laval, one the most successful program at U Sports history, look at those three guys at the top. Okay. You don't think that the OC and DC there could have gone anywhere and been a head coach? So what's the secret? Well, Coach Constantin, you look at Glenn and the things that he does, he obviously creates an environment that's amazing, right? He creates an environment that the players there, Coach Bertrand, one of the best recruiters in the country, well, he creates a place that people want to be a part of. So if we're listening to these types of things, if you're looking at the country and learning from the people before you, is it a secret? No. Is it hard to do? Absolutely. Because you got to dedicate your life to creating the environment that people want to be a part of. And that's really the secret sauce, in my opinion. And that's the difficult thing to do because if it was easy, everybody would do it. So you got to figure out that unique formula to you because we can't do what those other coaches do. We can't do what those other people do. You got to be you, authentic to you. So I always laugh. Coach Joe, for anybody who knows him, easygoing guy. And he'll be the first to pull me aside and say, I don't know if that message hit the way you wanted to. And then Coach Mike will come in and be like, hey, I know what you're getting at, but maybe this strategy would be better. And if I go back and say, hey, I'm the head coach, leave me alone. Well, I'm not living the values that I talk about. We need to challenge each other internally. It's about the players. It's always about the players, right? What do we need to do to help them get ready? And if you focus on that, your priorities figure out, pretty quickly what you need to do. And so that's where, like you said, Tavius and AJ and circling all the way back. Well, if they want to come back, that's a pretty good, recruiting pitch for anybody who wants to be here. The question is, are you ready as a player? Are you ready when your opportunity comes to be the next AJ, to be the next Ethan Pyle, to be the next Dan Hochevar, or go through the list, right? Like I said, every one of the programs has been successful. Hey, that guy's graduating. Okay, well, these programs are still being really good. So what is it? Is it that, okay, we can't find them, or is it that you build the environment? Right now, you two can't be replaced. So if you guys ever hang them up, there's no way that can take your okay, so you can't go anywhere. All right, I'm just telling you that. You're both young, so it's gonna be a lot of us talking, hopefully. But that's really where I got to give credit to the coaches.
Well, Coach, I want to be cognizant of the time because, of course, 7 p.m. on a Sunday only means that you are about to go into more and more meetings. So I think it would only be appropriate to wrap it up with another just of my favorite Coach Lang-isms, though I don't have it in as pithy a quote, just how we always talked about, and people who listen to the pod, follow the pod, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in, however it is and whenever it is you're tuning in. Have heard me say this time and time out of that growth towards greatness typically starts from a team that might be in the dregs and is losing big and maybe not winning a game to all of a sudden is competitive and you're losing those 50-50 games to then being on the positive side of more of those 50-50 games than you are and you're learning to win to eventually as the growth of your team comes along with that, you're now the team vying for championship merit. And I think as you've highlighted with that process of day in, day out, being aware of what is ahead of you and what is at the top of the mountain, but just looking at what we need to do to have success today, what we have to do to have success tomorrow, building off from last year. Let's get you onto a few more of the positive ends of those 50-50 games, and it's all in the cards for it to happen, having, with hope that everything plays out the way it is. So, Coach, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for all the great work you're doing with the school that Tom and I both love so dearly. And we appreciate, as always, your support of our show and for taking some time out of your very busy day to talk about your program today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I think the work you guys are doing, whether coaches want to admit it or not, every single coach listens to it because you're highlighting stories that people don't get to hear. And I really believe in our product and the athletes that we're getting. It's not a surprise. The Philpott twins are amazing. Key and Schaefer go through the pros. The product's here. So if we can continue to highlight it, I think, there is a day where somebody will say, hey, we got to get these guys back on TV. But credit to you guys, everything you're doing. I appreciate it. And anytime I can highlight your work, I'm happy to do so. And hopefully we get 12 guys on the field come the fall. So
yeah, I have to say, it's a credit to you, all of the things that you talked about. It's a team, it's a culture. You have to reset, you have to keep going. I directly asked you all of the questions that go against that, and you handled it with supreme grace, my friend. And it's why, as best as the team gets, Coach Surya for 2026 OUA Coach of the Year. I'm just going to put that out there right here as well. But we appreciate your time. Good luck to you next season. You know that the two of us will be watching very closely for as much or as little as that matters.
yeah, thanks, fellas. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Unreal. Well, thanks again to Coach Surya for joining us on this week's exit meeting. Next week, I think we might be heading back to Can West, or we might be heading down Highway 6. One way or the other, you'll find out by tuning in next week right here at the 55.